First of all, let me say I'm not an expert. I don't claim to be, and I will tell you right now, I'm not an expert. The reason I'm here is because 2.5 years ago, I heard information that didn't make sense to me, that there was a wind farm getting ready to be developed up in Neosho County. I'd seen wind farms in Beaumont and western Kansas. I'd seen them in different places in Kansas, but they're all in very low populated areas. Don't start the timer yet, Casey. I've already got the 9 minute, or the, yeah, there we go. So the first question I asked is, well, would wind developers want to come to southeast Kansas? I mean, I understand western Kansas where you have population densities out there of less than 5 people per square mile. Now, Labette County is 33 people per square mile, and that's not even taking out the lakes and recreation areas. I mean, it's a huge difference. You can build wind turbines out in western Kansas, and an awful lot of people are never going to see them or even be aware of them. That's not the case here. So that was my first question. Why are they coming here, and why are they coming now? So that's my presentation. Why here? Why not? Actually, I knew nothing about industrial wind energy. I just knew, hey, the wind blows. Western Kansas is awful windy. Seems like it makes pretty good sense to me. You put up these great big huge wind turbines out there. You let the wind blow them, turn them. The generator makes some electricity. It goes into the power grid. I knew that they weren't making the electricity for the people right there. That it was going into the general grid. I had that much understanding. That's about the extent of my knowledge at that point. So like I say, when I heard about what was happening up in Neosho County, got to know some really incredible people up there. Tammy and my wife and I got to know some really incredible people up there who were very concerned about trying to protect what they understood to be very special, very valuable in their county and this area. So we asked, why are they here? Why haven't they stayed in western Kansas? Well, there's a couple of factors. One set is factors that have caused the wind companies to have to look elsewhere besides western Kansas. They're perfectly happy in western Kansas. There is good wind. There aren't a lot of people to contend with. You don't have angry residents out there, very few, because they can cite them in very remote areas. They don't have much impact on anything out there. Minimal impact on wildlife, almost no impact on residential properties. So they're being pushed out of there. And then there's another set of factors that are causing them to be attracted to southeast Kansas. And this is from my own 2.5 years of kind of looking at this and trying to figure this out. So what are the opposing factors? These right here, these high voltage power lines. It's not the fact that they have them in western Kansas, it's they don't have enough of them, and the ones that they have aren't big enough. Electricity, well, high voltage lines are like a big pipeline, and they can only carry so much volume of, if you will, so much of a volume of electricity. And if you try to exceed that, it just becomes wasted electricity. So what they've done out in western Kansas is they built these industrial wind turbine complexes out there. They got to the point where they were about to exceed capacity. And what they've done out there is they have tried to upgrade the existing power lines as much as possible to try so that they can handle more capacity. And they've done that. They're at their limit right now. The only option they have now is to build new and bigger high voltage transmission lines. And you may hear something called the Grain Belt, not Grain Belt Express, but Express? The high voltage, yeah, Grain Belt Express. It's a multi-mega huge high voltage transmission line going from western Kansas all the way to Illinois. And so that you may hear about that. That is trying to address some of those issues. But right now, western Kansas, they have no more capacity to get the electricity out of western Kansas to other places. So that's pushing them out of western Kansas. So they kept moving east, because when you run in, as you go east, you get denser population centers. As there's more population, there's more high voltage transmission lines. And they were doing pretty good going east until they got right here. This is the Kansas Flint Hills. And when they got here, several companies, several developers of industrial wind energy projects met some huge resistance, not just among the residents, but among small landowners, large landowners. Local elected officials were also opposed to these developments coming in. Not all of them, but a large number of them to make an impact. Local, state, national conservation groups were terribly concerned about wind developments coming into the Flint Hills. And the reason that all of these people were so concerned was because they understood how unique the Flint Hills is, not just in Kansas, but in the world. There's no other place on this planet like the Kansas Flint Hills. In its ecosystem, in its geology, everything about it is pretty special. And these people knew that, and they wanted to protect it, to the point where they even took it to the Kansas Supreme Court, and these people prevailed against the wind industry. They were able, through a Supreme Court ruling, they were able to get the Flint Hills designated as a protected area that cannot be developed. And the reason that they all did this is because they did not want this ended up looking like an industrial park. It wasn't even something that would even be considered acceptable to any of those people. The factors that have brought them to southeast Kansas are again high voltage transmission lines. And it's the fact that since we are a more populated area than out western Kansas, we have more high voltage transmission lines. We have larger high voltage transmission lines. So we already have upgradable network for carrying the electricity that these developments would have. In other words, they can set up here. We don't have to, in the short term, worry about coming up with some way to carry the electricity that these developments would generate. The other thing that they found in southeast Kansas is that we are economically depressed compared to most parts of the country and even many parts of Kansas. In other words, it doesn't take as much money to incentivize landowners to become participants in an industrial wind project. So they can offer smaller amounts of money and get these projects advanced. The biggest thing about southeast Kansas is we don't like zoning in southeast Kansas. We hate it. We don't want to be zoned. We don't want to be told what we can and can't do on our property. And I get that. I absolutely get that. So we don't have any existing zoning regulations that would affect industrial wind development, even on a huge, huge scale. There is nothing that these companies need to do with local county commissions in Lebec County, for example. Same thing in Neosho County. They don't have to get any permission at all from the county commissioners or any governing body, because we don't have any zoning regulations. The only thing that they have to do is, because they have to bring these huge components in, they have to change our road systems. They have to adapt them to be able to handle the large components that will be coming in. And to do that, they have to get permission from the county governing body, the county commission, and that is done in the form of a road use agreement. And they will make some offerings for that road use agreement from county commissions, even in a county that has no zoning. So that's what makes southeast Kansas pretty attractive to these companies. But why now? These companies back in western Kansas were developing these industrial wind turbines back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and very successfully so. Why weren't they coming here at that same time if this is such a great place to develop these projects? Well, there's a couple of reasons, and the main reason is they're running out of time. And they're running out of support. The big thing that support, actually, really the only thing that supports industrial wind projects is something called the production tax credit. It's a taxpayer-funded set of payments, subsidies, and tax credits that are provided to the renewable energy industry. This is a program that was started back in 1992. It was a 4-year program established by Congress to provide support to wind and solar and biomass were the 3 largest energy production systems at that time. It was designed to kind of give them a foot up so that they could maybe kind of compete with the big oil and coal and natural gas and nuclear industries that were already providing electricity all over the country. In the 10-year period from 2010 to 2019, 2010 was the biggest year for subsidies for the wind industry alone. So in that 10-year stretch, the wind industry by itself, not even counting solar or any other of the renewable energy producers, wind energy alone received almost $40 billion in that 10-year period. In 2010, they received $5 billion, more than all other subsidies provided to any other, when you took all the other subsidies that were given to coal, natural gas, nuclear, solar, and all of the other producers combined, they didn't even come close to $5 billion. So wind was the big leader that year, and it has been every year since then. From 1992, when the 4-year program was first established, all the way up until 2016, wind energy developers and wind energy providers, utility companies, received 100% of their tax liability back from the federal government in taxpayer subsidies. If they had a $100 million tax liability, they could submit it as long as they met the requirements to receive that subsidy, and they would get $100 million back. In other words, it would be forgiven. They didn't have to pay that tax. Beginning in 2017, because of several factors, the amount of the subsidy was cut back 10% each year. So 2016, they got 100% of their tax liability returned back to them. In 2017, they only got 90%, and each year, all the way up until 2020, it was down to 60%. These companies cannot afford to continue operating on a 60% tax liability. They need to get back up as close as they can to 100%. So right now, they're in a frantic effort to try to get that tax subsidy back up, and the only thing that they can do right now is to build more projects to try to make up for the smaller return that they're getting on their taxes. Also, because there's so many more developers and utility companies that are now eligible for these production tax credits, the slices of the pie are getting smaller and smaller. So it's becoming imperative for these companies to try to get as much developed as quickly as possible as they can. They're also worried about the fact that, they say they're concerned about the fact that in the most recent legislation, the tax credit is designed to go away on December 31st, 2022. In other words, from 2023 on, the way the legislation is right now, there will no longer be any production tax credits. But they have been saying that for 29 years now. So, and it's still going strong. So I have no belief that it's actually going to end at that time. Okay, the other thing too is I mentioned about the fact that production tax credits are they're not just a big support for the wind industry. They are really essentially the sole support. Without them, without that production tax credit money, that we would not have this industry. And we know that because Warren Buffett, he's kind of known for saying what he thinks. He was talking to a group of investors up in Omaha back in 2014, and he said, "I will do anything that's basically covered by the law to reduce Berkshire's tax rate. For example, on wind energy, we get a tax credit if we build a lot of wind farms. That's the only reason to build them. They don't make sense without the tax credit. So what he's saying is, this is not an industry that's self-supporting. It has to be supported by taxpayer-funded subsidies and support. And currently, right now, all across the U.S., they're seeing less and less support for this industry. And it's not something, it's not a trend that's going to reverse itself. This is something that once people learn more and more about the details of industrial wind energy, and maybe to some extent solar energy as well, on an industrial scale, they lose their support for it. And if you look in countries like just to the north, Canada is a really good example, but this is happening across the across the U.S. You're seeing just regular people coming together like we're seeing around here, and they're asking for answers to questions that they're not getting answers to. And if they don't get the answers to these questions, they're going to ask, why can't we get the answers to this? Why is there such a rush? Why is there such a push that we have to have these things established before we know that they're a good fit for this area or not a good fit for this area? So that's the reason. They're losing the amount of money that they can get from tax credits, and they're losing general popular support from the people. And my belief is that they feel like they have a limited amount of time to try to make as much money as they can. And that's why Southeast Kansas now looks good to them. If they could stay in Western Kansas, they would. So, okay. Well, thank you very much. And Josh, I think